Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and good night to wherever you are in this galaxy far, far away. My name's Charlie Savage,
And my name's Jedha.
and welcome to episode 27 of Outer Rim Radio, the podcast made by Star Wars nerds for Star Wars nerds. We're back today with another episode, and we will be discussing Star Wars, The High Republic, The Battle of Jedha, which is an audio drama written by George Mann.
Yeah. This is going to be an interesting episode. Probably going to be short. I don't know. We'll see. But before we do that, we do have some really fun Star Wars news. Charlie, I mean, you've already made a video on this. Put this on your YouTube channel, so I'll let you go ahead and
Very
talk about.
true. Yeah. What we got both a cinematic and a gameplay trailer, well, more of a demo for Star Wars Outlaws, which is a gaming coming by way of Ubisoft via Massive Entertainment, who's the developer. They did Tom Clancy's The Division 1 and 2. They also did some things that were... I looked into them. I forget what their names were. It was almost like Command & Conquer, but not Command & Conquer. But overall, I'm pretty pleased with the devs. But from the gameplay footage, I'm thoroughly impressed. We saw... I'd say like a good variety of like gunplay. You can pick up your enemy's blasters, seemingly unlimited ammo, which would make sense that you kind of just empty the clip and get out and carry your pistol with you. Your gun has 3 different modes, which is like your normal shooting one, your impact one, and then like a stun one, which is nice. The game has stealth elements. You have this absolutely cute animal with you. The animal's name is Nyx, and what's the main character's name? I keep blanking. Kay Vess. And honestly, I'm super hyped. I'm glad that it's just not another like generic white guy character as the lead, but the fandom sometimes different parts of it are just like, no, I don't like that, and it really bothers me. But
A specific part of the fan. You mean incels, Charlie?
yes, I do.
They have a name. You can refer to them by their name. Let's be respectful to the incels.
Some of them are only misogynistic too.
Yeah. No, yeah. I think it's ridiculous. I mean,
some people were really like melting down about it. I was like, seek help.
Fucking melt. Who cares? Like, suffer.
Yeah.
And if you don't want to play the game, don't play the game. Yeah. I mean, that's the biggest thing about this is there's gonna be a lot of people complaining. They're gonna buy the game anyways.
Yup. A lot of them.
They're gonna play the whole game and be frustrated the entire time because they're like, oh my god,
it's a girl's butt on my screen and it's in third person.
But it's not massive. It's not like my anime game.
They forced this girl's butt in my face and I hate it.
No, it's to be honest with you, I think this game will it looks really cool. I'm excited for the concept. Yeah. You know, it'd be one thing I think people aren't really talking about the things that matter to me in this. You know, Ubisoft has they're well known for open world games, right? And open world adventures. Yeah. And they make fun games, but
there's sometimes too much filler.
There's too much filler. You know, a lot of the games that have had in the past microtransactions. You know, you look at the history of Star Wars games that have been around. You know, you think about Star Wars Battlefront. That is kind of a concern. You think about the Assassin's Creed games that came through those studios and how they just slowly started to build.
And the writers from this are like from the Far Cry games, a little bit Assassin's Creed, and one of the guys was an assistant writer on. He's like the narrative director. He was an assistant writer on Splinter Cell Blacklist, which is a really good game, but a lot of it is their track record is just Ubisoft games, which does kind of concern me because I do love a good Star Wars story. But at the end of the day, I'm not going to be mad when this is like, if this isn't like a crazy Star Wars story. But I also feel like the way it was kind of shown in like the initial teaser trailer was that our character is going to end up having to pull off some sort of heist, which is definitely both up me and Ethan's alley a lot as both lovers of Sly Cooper and Ocean's 11.
So, I mean, I'm totally for the game, the concept. Yeah. I mean, as much as I'm going to complain, I'm not going to be the guy who's like, I'm not going to buy it.
Right.
You know,
We're both
I
gonna
will
play
most
this.
likely buy it. We're gonna play it. I don't have to buy microtransactions.
Yeah.
Um,
That's usually my
but
only concern, but from the design, it seemed like I don't even know where you'd put them.
no,
Granted,
100%.
I used to think
But
that about Assassin's Creed, but
well, and then are they gonna put RPG camp mechanics in that can help it make pay to win or make it cool cosmetics?
it's
I don't think
yeah,
it's gonna be like if you pay $40, you can have a lightsaber. No, I don't think it's gonna be like that. But you know, at the end of the day, they have a reputation, and the fact that my wife and I that we were watching YouTube, just going about our day. I hadn't even brought up that game to her because I just got back from a work trip, and she sees the trailer. I'm like, "Oh, this is a new Star Wars game," and then Ubisoft's logo pops up, and she goes, "Oh boy, Ubisoft, it's ruined." And I was like, "That's not what we want to be bringing into this." So, I mean, they do have some exclusivity rights with a lot of the Star Wars games, and they have good dealings with the
yeah,
Star Wars content, but we'll see. At the end of the day, I would just encourage people as I encourage them for every game. If you're worried about it, don't pre-order it.
yeah.
Just see what
But
happens when it
in
comes out and
general,
then
don't
play 'em.
pre-order games. I only ever pre-order games if like the pre-order bonus is really cool and it's a day before launch and I know I'm going to buy it the next day.
Right.
Like,
Like I was going to buy Tears of the Kingdom. Like I'm going to buy the next Zelda game.
yeah,
That's like well, I knew I was going to buy Jedi Survivor.
yeah. And I think
Just no way about it.
yeah. And there's so many interesting features in this. What I think the most interesting entire like thing about this game is that it has like a faction reputation system like Fallout New Vegas has, which I think is awesome because you're just going to
I'm
be going
so
between
ready
the
for that.
syndicates
It's going to be
and
so
pulling
good.
jobs,
I'm
and you get to make like what we saw was just making player decisions, and a lot of people were like complaining about this game, and I was just kind of like, this is kind of the player choice I want in Star Wars. I think it's cool that I mean there may or may not be some sort of canon element to as to which is the proper way to it, but it's like, I mean, does Cal Kestis really find all those seeds on that on planet and finish the garden on Kova? I don't know, man. But you know, I think like just having this like morally ambiguous character, to which it's like, oh yeah, they were just kind of pulling different jobs between all the different factions, but here are the core tenets of like the main storyline. I think that's awesome. It has like a wanted system like Grand Theft Auto has, seemingly, where the
And
Empire
this game
chases
is set
you.
between it's in the Empire, right? If you
Yeah,
haven't
it's
watched the
between
trailer, it's
episodes
set
5
between
and
which
6.
yeah, I just wanted to bring that up. So it's in a really cool time.
Yeah,
It's in an interesting time period. I mean, it's going to be fun one way or another. And I mean, it's bringing back, although we can complain about RPG mechanics, I think it's bringing back as someone who's just an absolute love. I mean, I play nothing but RPGs most of the time. It is bringing back old school RPG mechanics, and I love that you talk about Fallout New Vegas because all these people, and even the neckbeards who are complaining about there's a woman in it, if this is even close to being like that Fallout New Vegas system, the people will be in love with it.
yeah,
There's a lot here that if you're a really avid gamer, um, I think there's something for you in this that will be exciting. Is it going to be Star Wars Bounty Hunter? Is it going to scratch that itch? We don't know yet, but it's trying to push a boundary in something we really haven't seen in Star Wars in a long time. I mean, even if you want to think about the morality system that we saw in KOTOR, which is no longer canon, don't get me wrong, with Darth Revan, but those games that was light or dark, not I've got to balance how I'm interacting with these different syndicates, and if I screw someone
right.
over I might be locked out of jobs forever, so they might
Which,
send bounty hunters
yeah,
after me. That's going to be exciting one way or another. Now how the game is produced and how good it will be, I would just say wait until it's out and then go from there, man.
yeah. I mean, what they showed looked solid, but everyone thought like Watch Dogs was the greatest thing when it was first shown too. So we saw how
Yeah,
that turned out, and I know that's almost a decade ago at this point. Which, holy crap, I
but I
feel
mean
old, but
sour taste left in your mouth is still a sour taste, right? Like
yeah.
you're still
But
sitting
also
here
that
going,
same
have they redeemed themselves?
yeah, and that same company also published Assassin's Creed 4 Black Flag, which is one of my favorite games ever. So it's like,
It's
you
amazing.
take what you get, you'll see what it is. But overall, I'm so excited about this game. I think just like having that faction system can add so much replayability to that. And you know that as someone who constantly replays Fallout New Vegas, even if you are just going to, jump through Deathclaw Valley straight to New Vegas to just gamble with 9 luck.
He knows. He knows the strats. But yeah, I think at the end of the day, like what Charlie and I are gonna get about, it's just it looks good. There's things that are
Yeah.
interesting. It's different. I encourage you, if you haven't watched the trailer yet, go look it up. Go look up the Star Wars
Also,
Outlaws
so many cool
trailers.
planets.
Watch it. There'll be a lot of cool stuff we can do. It'll be unlike any Star Wars game we've played in a long time. So I'm excited for it, and I'm ready to see what happens. That's it.
Exactly.
Well, Charlie, other than that, it was just basically, hey, we know some movies are coming out in 2026. Not really anything
Yeah.
too special. I mean, what we know
And this
that,
is a result of the writer's strike as well.
yeah, we just know stuff's getting
And I
pushed
just
back. I
expect
mean, it
expect
happened.
this to
It
go
happened
on
with
and
Marvel.
things shift everywhere. So I'm like, but essentially what's going on here is that in 2026 there will be 2 movies coming out. I believe one in May and one in December. The one in May that should come out should be the new Jedi Order movie, which is the Rey movie, and the next one after that, it gets kind of fuzzy after that. People are saying, I think it's going to be Dawn of the Jedi, but a lot of people are like, oh, well, maybe the site said it was the Filoni movie, which I think is the farthest one off.
Oh yeah, I mean, dude, we've been waiting for some of these
And then
movies
it's
for
like the Taika Waititi
years.
things are still happening, and then it's
Right,
like,
we've been waiting on that forever. Like at this point, just and I know, like I said, with Taiki Waititi, he is known to literally like write a script, leave it for a year, and then come back to it,
yeah,
and then rewrite. I know how he writes. It takes a long time for him. I get it. However, the speculation on this, given the writer's strike, is just silly.
yeah. I
Now I
mean,
get. I mean, the problem is with a Star Wars movie, we can't forget how early they make these movies compared to when they come out. Same with Marvel,
yep,
because there is so much they have to do in yeah, we've got the production process, but post production with all the CG and the editing, um, it's going to be a while till we get to some
yeah,
substantial movies that everybody's excited about. And, if that's just a result of what happens in the industry with the writer's strike, we're just going to have to deal with the punches.
exactly.
They might rush out some lesser movies that no one really cares about, cuz
And
not
that's what
no one,
worries
but
me. And I think the Star Wars movies will be that, but in general,
you, that's just the kind of thing I think will happen,
yeah.
pessimistically. So,
In
at this point,
2007, so many good shows got ruined because of them not letting like the writers actually write the shows. They were just like, guys, we can write the shows, and they're like, why is Lost terrible all of a sudden?
yeah, good point. Good point.
Like,
Yeah. So, I mean, we'll see. I'm hopeful for these movies. I'm fine with waiting on any of these. Um,
yeah,
I think like with the Filoni movie, everything's been so drawn out anyways that it's like just a
yeah,
couple more years,
yeah,
So we'll just have to just
yeah,
chill it out, wait and see, and we'll go from there. I mean, it's just not worth the speculation anymore.
yeah. I mean, and the thing that people are concerned about is that, of course, the next Star Wars movie just lines up with an Avengers movies, which last time that happened, that went pretty poorly for Solo, and it went much. They were kind of competing with themselves, putting it out at the same time as Avengers: Infinity War.
Yeah, I mean, we'll
But I
see
also
what's
think they'll
going
just.
on
I think they
then.
learned from that and they'll adjust.
Yeah, I mean, 20. Oh, it's gonna come out 3 weeks after. Like, it'll get moved. Trust me. Everything's gonna get shifted around. Nothing's set in stone right now.
Yeah,
Anything with the writer's strike is not set in stone. Things will get moved. So trust me, bro.
exactly. That's why I'm like, I mean, yeah, but the movie that comes out in December is probably just going to come out in 2027,
Yeah, we'll see.
especially if they have nothing until March. Just put out a movie around then, you know. But yeah, overall, I mean, I think Disney won't make the same mistake twice. And again, I'm still gonna see the movie. I'm From what we know that the new Jedi Order movie should be the next one that comes out, just because um, the writer and multiple people at Star Wars have basically just been like, "Oh yeah, this will be the next movie." Which is like, okay, cool. This will be the next Star Wars movie.
Yep.
Makes
All right,
sense.
Charlie.
But
Well,
now we get to it.
let's
The
talk about
Battle
what
of
we're here
Jeddah.
for. Yeah. So, background, like Charlie said, this is an audio drama. If you don't know what an audio drama is, I want you to think of like a radio show. So, this book, similar to we did an episode on Tempest Runner, a long time ago. This book is in that format. It's fully voice acted. You have all these sound effects in the background, so you're really just kind of. It's like you're if you're closing your eyes, you're just being carried around blind through Star Wars, hearing sounds,
My
hearing people
fantasy
talk.
every time.
Yeah, just being blind in the Star Wars universe.
Sure it.
And it is an interesting format. I think audio dramas will be. I guess it's not a very popular format. For the reason that it's like, I mean, we're young. I mean, there's not a lot of people who are very familiar with old radio shows that used to be like that. That
Yeah.
used to be a very common thing to have audio dramas, and it hasn't been for a long time. However, I do think it's an interesting format for Star Wars. They're having the dialogue tends to give you a lot of background into the character. You have a lot of talking. You get a lot of personality out of it. And for someone who doesn't want to sit through a full book, you get basically the plot of a book in a really condensed format, because instead of them
Right.
describing the blast and the sounds, they just
How
play
did
a
it make
blast. The
them
characters
feel?
react to it. Right. They just react to it. Now, it can be a little stilted. We'll talk about this in a second, because everything deserves a verbal reaction, right? But just to give a little plot summary, basically, the events leading up to this book were Convergence, Star Wars Convergence, which Charlie and I just did an episode about. If you haven't seen it, go look it up. It's episode 26 of our podcast. I think it was a really good episode, but a
I
really
agree.
great book. So that's kind of leading into this, right? So basically, we got these two neighboring planets of Irem and Arano, after 5 years of merciless war, have been drawn in finally to a ceasefire with the marriage of their heirs and the help of the Jedi. So, however, to ensure a lasting peace, the Jedi and the Republic arranged for a treaty signing of these two planets on the pilgrim moon of Jedha. So, Jedha, Republic planet. We have seen Jedha in other content, most notably what, Charlie?
Rogue One, and also Jedi Survivor, where you actually got to explore it, which was nice.
Yep,
It
exactly.
was nice that it wasn't just
So
a temple that exploded one time.
yeah, so you get to kind of get the feeling for like what this was before it fell apart, which is cool about this book. However, you know, in its early edition, or like in the past, in the High Republic era, Jeddah is not just some place. It's not just some moon. It's a holy city for the Force. So it's not an easy task for the Jedi, taking them here, but they're being aided on this quest for peace by the many sects of Force religions that peacefully coexist on the Holy Moon.
Yeah, which
However,
some parallels here
n-
into the real life.
yeah, yeah, exactly. However, not all are so welcoming of this peace, and some might take any measure possible to prevent it, even if it means bringing destruction to the peaceful planet moon of Jeddah. So it's a really interesting premise. Um, and at first, like, I think at a first glance going into this book, you're like, this is going to be what's the runtime? It was like 5 hours,
It's
like
like 5.5
around.
hours.
It's literally 300 minutes.
Yep.
So 300 minutes of peace talks? Well, no.
And you
Very
thought those
little of the book,
negotiations were long in the prequels, baby.
for real. That's funny. Most of the book is intrigue and action, and investigating who, spoiler alert, bombs the peace treaty.
Who would do
Ends up
such a thing?
killing the mediator, and then you're like, oh my gosh, the path of the open hands here, because they're in literally every book until we get to the Nihil.
Yep.
Like it or leave it. That's what's happening. If you haven't listened to the podcast yet, literally every High Republic era book has had the Nihil or the Path of the Open Hand.
Yeah, and
Just the
we
way it
went
is.
back, so
So,
we're doing all the Path of the Open Hand. We'll get to the Nihil way back when we get to.
oh yeah, and I think this was a really cool premise, and there was a lot of really cool stuff going on. Uh, However, and I want to hear Charlie's take on it because I know we have a different take. I thought this plot was not served by the audio drama. I thought it was too complex for what was actually. I thought the plot was too complex for what was going on. I really like the characters. I like the voice acting, except for Gilanatai,
Yeah, we both
which just
agreed.
sounded like an. It sounded like an AI. I literally. That's why I texted Charlie
Yeah,
when I
and then
first
I
listened.
was
I was
like,
like, "Yo, I think they used AI voice actors."
yeah, and then I was listening. I was like, oh, that's what he meant. That's just an anime voice actress. And I looked it up and I was like, right before the show, I was like, yep. She plays the cat in Persona. Which is like, it's cool when
So
it's
yeah,
that, but I was like, we had an entire story. I was like, that was not what I thought Gela was going to sound like. Did not think she'd sound like
yeah.
an
Gil.
anime
I
character.
was thinking Ella would have this like kind of gruff, clear, or like this clear alto voice, a little bit of a deeper voice, like being she
Yeah.
was the strong, very focused, driven woman, fiery, and then you're like, I can't
Hi,
even.
senpai. And you're like, oh God, okay. Hello.
You're like, what the fuck? Yeah, very jarring. I don't want to shit on this too much initially, so I
Yeah.
want to let you talk a little bit, Charlie, because I once I get pessimistic, I stay pessimistic.
I've
So I'm gonna let
noticed
you
it's
get
kind of a
positive
running theme. Did you bring up the sequels yet? No.
soon,
But
soon, soon, my boy.
I really enjoyed this as like a really short thing, but I agree with a lot of your critiques. I think I like this as much as I like random like the lesser arcs in like season 5 of Clone Wars, if that makes sense. Like I like this as much as I like the Water World arc in Clone Wars, where I'm like, this was neat, but it's nothing. It's definitely not mandatory reading material. It's not that it's nothing crazy. I like the very direct plot between our two main characters who are doing the investigation. The guy from the church, I love his droid, by the way, absolutely fantastic, and our Jedi protagonist in this instance. I really like the characters. I like what's going on. I like the discussions between them and the Path of the Open Hand. I love the brothers of was it the Ninth Door? Is that what it was?
Yep, you got it.
Yeah. Like I love a lot of this stuff. But this I kind of agree that this format like it makes sense because I think this is too much for or it's not enough to be a book, but I also think it's also not enough to be like it obviously they're not going to make like a TV show out of it, but or like a limited run. Um so I think this is kind of like a story that someone wanted to tell and this is kind of where it landed. I imagine it was between this and then like 6 issues of a comic book. That's kind of how it feels, and it's like I like this, but it's definitely not the best thing I've ever listened to or enjoyed. But I'm glad I know what happened specifically because going forward into Cataclysm, which we'll do next, um, what happens on Jedha, it kind of gets beaten around. It seems like oh, it was complicated, but I'm really glad that we went through and got to listen to this for that reason. I think it'll be better going forward and just kind of knowing the context. I think it was good enough for what it was, but I don't think it was like it didn't change or didn't make me feel anything super bad until of course the thing that happens at the very end because it's a High Republic story.
Everyone dies. The
Yeah.
end. At least one person dies, and you have to be sad.
Yeah. And I was like
It's my
I was at
essentially, this book had to have another Kevmo Zink moment where it's like, I
his
really like
name
this
is
character.
similar too. What's his name?
I know it's. Oh, I got it pulled up. I am blocking it out right now. Oh, I have it pulled up. Oh, Keth Sarapath.
Yeah, Kev and versus Kev. Yeah.
Yeah. So was I attached to Keth as much? No, I found him a little bit annoying at first, but he was an endearing character. He very actually I was thinking about him and it kind of reminded me of Cal Kestis in the very beginning where he's a very much
Yeah,
like
I was kind of
kind
like,
of head in the clouds, like trying to do the right thing, a little bit naive, like not he's surprised that people will do such bad, but he's there to react to it and help people. Like he was a very wonderful character. And then he just dies and you're like, "Wow, thanks. I don't know why I spent the entire book just getting attached to it." Especially considering at the beginning you're like, "Oh my god, this guy's droid was turned into a bomb."
yeah,
Which
where they're pulling
actually this
that.
turns out to be a red herring,
It's a bit of
so
a ruse.
a ruse, yeah. So I think you're right, Charlie. I think if you kind of have to know what happens in this book. Um, I haven't read Cataclysm yet, so I'm interested to see how it
Yeah.
transitions. Because
Basically, they're
for
going to be
me,
doing the investigation from the other, and I'll be done that much to where
right,
they're like, okay, we know something's going on with the path, and
right,
we're going to
yeah,
talk
because
to
basically they
Axel.
contacted Jedi after this. Because we'll talk about this in a second. But it's like, did you really need to know something happened, other than like, hey, there was use of peace talks, there was a massacre that happened on Jeddah because these two planets couldn't make peace, and people were trying to get in the way of that. Okay, nothing too crazy there, right? Um, I just I felt like this audio drama missed out on a lot of things that I really have been liking about Star Wars High Republic series. And this is no criticism to George Mann, and it might just be that, it's a 300-minute audio drama, right? Like it's
Yeah,
not that long in the grand scheme of things. I mean,
and it
if
only
you're going to
takes
look
place
at how
across like 48 hours, really. Right,
yeah,
48,
literally,
72 hours.
basically, yeah, it's 72 hours. That's actually a great point, and we should have brought this up. Like the whole premise of the book, like maybe about half of it is like each chapter, quote unquote. They're not chapters, but it's just like breaking up
Part
different
6,
scenes. Is
yeah.
like it will basically be like 42 hours until
The
the
bomb.
battle begins, and so there is some tension and it's really cool. I just don't think that ever pays off because it just the battle begins is a riot, and then the peace treaty called off, and then Iram and Arano are fucking attacking each other on the planet, which makes zero fucking sense why they're attacking the planet and not, I don't know, fighting in fucking space because this is Star Wars.
Yeah, or at least in the air, in the atmosphere.
This
But
is
I'm
one
like,
of these
what
Star
is the
Wars
ground
novels
that
that
needs to be covered in Jeddah? Like, I don't understand it. You think you're gonna occupy the city?
right, they're just fighting there to fight. I'm like, Don't you have ships that you can fight each other with?" Because that's literally they're like, "Oh,
I was like, how
we
many
feel
guards
the
were there
Jedi
on this
feel
fucking
uncomfortable."
planet that were just deployed? Like,
It literally such so much of this book felt kind of just like shocked together, and like it's like, "Oh, I guess we need
I
to
didn't
fill in
even
some
like
gaps
think about
here."
that part, and I feel kind of silly now that you brought it up. But yeah,
And that's the thing is like I feel like this is a really cool idea, and then you kind of poke your head in a little bit further and you're like, "Oh, there's some holes in this that I didn't really realize before."
yeah,
And
and
although I am usually I'm a hater, right? That's why Charlie and I work together. He anything he pretty much loves most things.
yeah,
I can get some controversy going. I have loved every High Republic book so far. This is not it for me. I'm gonna be completely honest. I
yeah.
was not impressed. However, um, I did really like Cat Serapath. I thought they had some really cool
I
characters.
love his
I
droid so
really
much.
liked.
It's so funny.
I really.
It's the best
Oh
bit.
yeah, yeah. So essentially, the bit Charlie's referencing is Keth has a droid that he basically refurbished, but he refurbished it out of parts of what I've called a processional droid, which is basically, hey, it's a church droid that's only basically there to say religious things. So this
So it
droid
only
can only
speaks in scripture.
he can only can speak in scripture. So like the entire time you're like, oh, this is just a religious fanatic droid, and you realize he's just being an asshole and like being a highly sarcastic little shithead, but he has to say
The
that
forest
through
knows
like
all. The forest.
scripture. So when people are telling secrets about him and he sneaks up, he'll literally be like, all is known through the force. And you know,
Oh, good.
it's it's a really good bit, and it actually pays off in the end. Unfortunately, when Keth dies, it does give a really nice moment when he's speaking in scripture about his, you know, Keth is a member of a church of the Force, and as
Also,
he
I like that we
passes
see
in and
that
goes,
where it just seems kind of like a normal. I mean, it seems very Christian-esque church.
it really was because they're like, oh, he just like swept the floors and
He just
light
speaks in
candles, and like when you
parables,
go in there,
and yeah,
speaks in parables, and they're
guys
like
and
chanting
acolytes,
in the
like
background, and you're like acolytes, prefects, like they have all these weird religious titles, and then all the other sects of religions there, like the Brothers of the Ninth Door, or like we're the fucking dark side guys who wear skull masks and fucking shank people in the streets, and you're like,
yeah,
okay, I don't know how we got from this to essentially Satanists. Uh,
they
like,
all worship this planet.
yeah,
all
man.
worship on this planet. But
Also, okay, let's talk about this.
go ahead.
Path to the Open Hand. It's a really big part of this book, right? They basically help exacerbate everything that happens here.
Yeah,
Because the Herald, which he is just kind of like he used to be the leader of the Path to the Open Hand until the mother comes in. We've talked about that in a couple books that we've done so far,
yeah.
right? So that's just kind of the background now. The Herald kind of goes rogue, starts chanting out all this shit, starts a riot, which ends up starting the battle.
These people
really
are abusing the Force.
we didn't need like half of the book because like all of that gets ignored by the time he gets there, and he's like, yeah, fuck the Jedi. And everybody's like, yeah, fuck the Jedi, let's burn this place to the fucking ground. And you're like, okay, I guess
I'm
this
like,
is
I'm
happening.
surprised how much everyone went with it.
Like,
'Cause
oh yeah, we're all religious pilgrims, fuck the Jedi.
yeah, it's like,
You're like, God, that was
what?
quick.
Yeah, and I think a large part of it is because not only did he go after the Jedi, but he went after the Jedi as like an institution, and he went after just like the Council of Jedha, which is it's basically they have a council of all religions and basically decide who gets in their cool club. So of like, oh,
Yeah,
we're
and
gonna
the Path to the
recognize
Open
your
Hand
religion.
didn't get invited to sit at the cool
Yeah,
kids
because they're
club.
a cult. But
Just straight up, and it's like you're like, oh, look how dangerous this cult is, and you're like, I know, I've seen it in 2 other fucking books so far. Like,
yeah,
neat. I mean, the funny thing to me, this fucking there's this scene where they're out in this market and they meet, Marta Rowe. Kevmo, I hurt. All I can think about him is when she comes up. Anyways, Marta Rowe, she's walking with these kids, these littles as they call them in the
it's
cult,
my
which is a weird
favorite thing in the
name.
book. It's so funny.
They're walking and they're like, oh, what are these animals? These crazy animals. They look like giant cats or lions or some shit. It's like, oh, these are fucking barugas. I can't remember what they're called. Some silly
Barugas.
Star Wars name.
Yeah.
And he's like, oh, they hunt through the force. And they're like, what? Yeah, they sense the force. And it's like, oh, are they manipulated? No, they just sense it, And it's like, oh, that's cool. So they're like force sensitive. They can hunt through that. And you're like, actually, let me hold off. I'll bring this point up in a second, but I want to talk about what I know Charlie wants to bring up. And literally, the little girl's like, okay, well, we'll see you later. I'll see you at the festival, animals. And they all walk away. And the little girl goes, oops, I left my flowers. Turns around, goes back, opens the cages to all
Wargarans
these
is what they're
giant
called.
Wargarans, opens the cages to these creatures, and then they just go off and kill people. They slice this little girl's face open and has to be sewed closed later in the book. And you're like, why does this exist?
I love this.
And like literally the only
It's
payoff of
chaotic.
this, other than the little girl just has a gash across her face, they're like, that might open up, during everything happening later in the book. The only payoff of that is that people start blaming the Path of the Open Hand and realize that they released it. Even though earlier they're like, the Path
But
of
then
the
they
Open
catch it
Hand
and they're
saved
like,
us.
yay, Path of the Open Hand, they've been helping people.
It literally made no sense how we got to that point. I'm just sitting there like, huh? Okay. But the
Nice
thing
little.
that bothered me the most, it's like we literally had that happen and then the leveler comes out. And the only reason, and the
The leveler
kills
goes
like
so
2 people.
unaddressed in this story.
It kills 2 people and then just absolutely fucks off. You would think that a force a creature that literally like basically feeds on the Force, which basically this is the weapon of the Path of the Open Hand. This is what killed Kethnos Inc. Rest in peace, my boy. And whatever his fucking Jedi Master's name is, I don't care.
Pour one out.
Yeah, pour one out. You know, that's what killed the Jedi, and it literally drains all the Force from their body, and you're turned into a husk, right? It does that to like 2 characters in this. Does not hunt the Jedi, the people who are the most attuned to the Force, have a high metachlorian count,
or just like random people.
Makes sense. Just like, yeah, this fucking random guy, I'm gonna grab him by the ankle and turn him to dust, and you're like, okay, see you in a chapter when the Jedi come fight you, and it's like, nope, didn't happen. The only reason we know the Leveler was on the planet in the first place is what's her name? Salandra, Jedi Master Salandra Show. She's going to the Pass base for whatever to like help, like she was delivering something or asking a question.
Yeah.
And she can feel it down there, and it's like she's like, oh, I feel like I was severed from the Force for a little bit, and that's it.
Yeah, it's just to draw the parallel that they know that that's the part of the Path of the Open Hand. They'll bring it back later, but it's like nothing paid off immediately in the story for like certain parts of it. Like you just addressed, the one was just completely random. The one set up for later. It's just like,
let me put it this way. This is because let's compare apples to apples, Charlie. This is how I want to do it. So, I purchased the hardcover copy of Convergence for about $19.
Right.
I really like Convergence. It was well worth the read. Let's remind ourselves how many pages Convergence was. 368. 368 pages. Okay. Now, there's a little bit of we can't compare apples to orange, here, because although we said this is an audio drama, you can buy the script through Amazon. And nowhere on Amazon does it tell you that this is a script.
Yay,
Amazon, unless you read it. It does it in the title, right? So it does say, after the events of Jedi of the High Republic Convergence, Jedi travel to Jedha, and the full script for the Star Wars audio original, The Battle of Jedi. It does say script by George Mann. I guarantee there's people who bought this and didn't know. Guarantee it.
Yeah.
It is 512 pages. It is $20. And granted, it's hard to compare the size because most of the pages are going, like, one line will just be Tilson Graf, Ambassador Tintak, because that's how a script is formatted.
Yep.
I would be so absolutely pissed if I bought the script to this, because also a large part of understanding what's going on in this is purely because the audio.
Yeah.
I mean, I do understand. Hey, like if
they release these delayed so we can have them, but
if you're deaf, I'm glad the script's out there for you. However, I just think if we're comparing just what we got in other books to this is the script's literally more expensive, partly because distribution wise, less people are going to buy it.
Yeah.
I just like, honestly, no disrespect to George Mann, this was a waste of my time. I just wasn't really. It killed 5 hours in the car for me. I mean, you know what the coolest thing about this book was? Creighton's son.
I thought you were gonna say the bit with the droid.
Oh, the droid was fun too. With P3 in the bar, and I did like Cat Sarapath. So basically, the plot line I enjoyed, which was about an hour of the book, was Cat Sarapath with Salandra Show. Honestly, should have been the main characters. I do like Ada Forte. I do like Kratos' son. They're great characters. I actually did like the opening to this book, but basically once you get out of the first third of this book, I'm just out. Like, it was not very interesting for me.
Yeah, it was 5 hours. Killed the day of work for me. I get to come here, talk about it with my best friend. That's the best part of it. But
right. I mean, would we rather bitch about this, or we'd rather bitch about like politics or something?
Yeah. And like I said, I'm not here to like, completely just bitch about, oh no, someone worked hard on the story. I'm just like, my thoughts. I like it as much as I like the Waterworld arc in Clone Wars. It's like
Oh yeah. I
that
mean,
was
it was
neat.
still Star Wars. It's still Star Wars. Yeah,
Yeah,
and I think that's the thing. When I'm saying like, oh, I hate it. I don't hate this. It's just like I have loved everything in the High Republic, so I think to get a stinker is a little bit of a letdown for me because like I've
yeah,
enjoyed everything. I mean, like I just think through and through, I was left with a lot of characters that I really enjoyed. I really liked Jedha as a setting. I would have loved to spend more time here and be able to like
agreed.
get the inside out. I would have loved to have a visual description of what the knights, the not the knights,
The
what is it, the
statue
brothers of the
was, or
night,
like
the statue, so the
the
guardian
settings, the
statue, which
fancy
is this
ballrooms.
yeah, so no, but the brothers of the ninth door, like their evil spooky dungeon
Yeah,
that they've got
or
under
how they
Jeddah,
manipulate the dark side of the force. The like,
to create illusions and all this stuff. And there was some cool content with that. So, basically there's this dark side cult, who are, we find out later, the assassins who were paid to orchestrate this, which is cool. Dark side assassins. Now we're
yeah,
getting into some
I
like
love seeing
KOTOR shit,
Darksider
right?
stuff that isn't just the Sith or not technically the Sith, like Maul and Savage, but are basically the Sith who go
Yeah.
around saying they're the Sith, and then Palpatine's like, "No, you're not." But
No, 100%.
it's nice to
It
see
was
bad
really cool to
guys
see.
without lightsabers that are like, "Yes, we are dark side users."
How did you feel about the fights in this? Were they easy for you to follow along? Were they distracting?
They were pretty easy for me to follow along. I feel like if I was like trying to navigate traffic, like I imagine you might have been, it would have not been as easy.
Well, I mean, like, I understand what was going on, but I'm like, I don't know what he's fighting with. I don't know, like,
Yeah.
I
Also,
hear
I
a
like the
lightsaber hitting
shield. Can we
something,
talk
but
about the shield? I like the shield.
and that was Solandra's show, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So basically, again, and this is the character I liked the most. I thought Solandra's show was really cool. She's a human Jedi Master, really cool character. But she carried a shield on her back. Um, and everybody comments on it throughout the book, and it's very interesting. But she eventually, like, it's not just like this ornamental thing. She actually uses it with the Force. Um, and it was very different how she was fighting with essentially a shield and a lightsaber.
Yeah.
It was super cool. I mean, I will say, one of the biggest plot points of this is, I mean, it didn't have to happen. Like, this doesn't affect the plot of the entire series if you remove this out. But um, Solandra's show does save the mother, right? And if the
Yeah.
mother would die, the honestly, any of the events that take place after this book wouldn't have happened,
I know.
at least in the High Republic. You know, and so when it does actually lend, I did like this. I
Yeah,
was thinking
Lara.
about this when I was in the car. It did lend to what the Path of the Open Hand was saying, essentially. Uh, hey, if Jedi, if anyone manipulates the Force, there will be consequences.
Yeah.
There must be balance. So if you save someone's life, other people must die, which is exactly what happens.
Yeah.
And we know will happen because the mother is alive, people will die. Now, is that because of the Force or is that just because of, consequences? We'll find out. We know that this is a Force cult. They're not very, um, they don't beat around the bush. They literally, like everything in Star Wars, even the like that we see about the Path of the Open Hand, they describe them as a cult.
Yeah.
You know,
And also the like after like, 3 books in a row, I'm like, bro, the gaslighting is starting to get to me. It's like really bothering me. Like, that's not how
I know.
it
I
works.
want her to get.
It's like talking about Grey
Oh,
Jedi with people for like every book.
oh,
And I'm like, guys, that's not what that means. That's not how it works. Which also I just kind of thought about. It's interesting that they don't necessarily have a philosophy of like the dark side. The dark side for them is just kind of the consequences of manipulating the Force.
right. Like Sith only exists because Jedi exist.
Yeah, strange. They're
Yeah,
the outliers.
yeah. I think I am. It's it's an odd one. You know.
Yeah.
Um. Well, let's talk about the villain. We can talk about that a little bit. Tilson Graf. How'd you feel about the villain? This is one of my complaints about the.
Here's the thing. I like the idea. I like the voice acting. I do not necessarily like the execution. He was pretty much kind of just a pawn for Path of the Open Hand. I wish we would have seen them go back and forth a bit more, just get more of an insight into their history or how long they've been working together. Because he kind of just gets set up and then he gets killed in the street. I'm like, that could have been
Yeah.
anyone.
So we're literally left almost the entire book with just like or audio drama, like trying to figure out what is going on and who is who, right? Like who caused this? We've got these illusions that are tricking everybody with the Brothers of the Ninth Door, and basically everybody saw a different person set up the first bombing, right?
Yep.
Well, we don't really find out to the end who's at the head of all this, and it's Tilson Graf. Now, if you don't know much about the Old Republic in Star Wars, one of the biggest things, if you've never played KOTOR, go play KOTOR. It will set a lot of this up. They just kind of use some of the families, and that got extrapolated later into Star Wars. But there's two families that are basically rich through most of Star Wars: the Santecas and the Grafs.
Yep.
They're like the outer rim. We make all the money, bring it into the Republic.
We invented highways, so now it's basically an analog for trains, actually, more so, but yeah.
Yeah, it's like they're like train barons. I mean, that's essentially, and the Grafs are like the more seedy ones, right? Well, from the beginning, we know
We
Tilson
hired the
Graf has fell out of
Pinkertons to figure this one out. Yeah.
Pinkertons to stop people from
You
pirating
can't travel in this
games.
hyperspace lane. What do you think you're doing with that nihil technology? No.
That too.
What is your path?
So
No.
so Tilson Graf's literally his whole MO is I just want to start a war so I can make money off of it and win my family's good graces back. And you're like, that's why all of this happened. And Star Wars is traditionally like, hey, there's some really evil fecker, and you're gonna really hate him, and you love to hate him, right? Like I think of Darth
Right.
Maul, right? Like the perfect Star Wars villain, right there. Not that every villain has to be that, right? We don't
Yeah.
need a
But
Sith or a dark side user all the time.
Yeah.
He's so like he's so lame that like I found myself being like, okay, as soon as he got shot dead in the street, I'm like, okay,
Yeah, it
that's
was
it then.
like I said, it really could have been anyone. I kind of wish we would have gotten more of his involvement through the narrative. Like
Honestly, it would have even been better to just not know
either one of
and
those would have worked.
leave it like, oh,
And
we
then
still
just
have to
expand it
figure out
later.
was it the path. That's what I'm saying. You know, it almost would have been better if the path did orchestrate this in a
Right.
way. Now everything blew up in their face. A lot of people died in the path, and it did bond the Jedi seemingly closer with the Path of the Open Hand because Salandra Show, who was shunned by the Path of the Open Hand because of their beliefs at the beginning of the book. At the end, she saves the mother. They thank her. The mother has this heart to heart where she's like, I don't agree. She's with her followers. She's like, I don't agree with, and she said, like I said, with her followers, says it publicly. I don't agree with how you use the Force, but I know you practice what you believe and you care about the Force essentially.
Right.
And and of all the things we got from the mother, it's the most like not I'm going to murder someone in the middle of the night thing that she says.
Yeah, the
You're
least
like,
psychotic thing she's ever said. Yeah.
right, like because literally like a scene before this, she just murders Tilson Graf in the streets because Tilson Graf is essentially extorting her. Like you didn't cut loose ends, so you have to help me.
And she's like,
This is
"Oh,
your
I'll
only way
cut
to
my
get out.
loose end."
And
Bang.
just shoots him like a dog in the street, which is in a way satisfying. But when that's your main villain of the story, you're just like, eh.
Yeah, that's why I'm.
But it was cool to see the path a little bit fleshed out. I would have rather we have a entire audio drama that was a little bit more simplified, right? Rather than this big battle happening here, and
I
we
get
were
that for sure.
investigating a path member who assassinated someone because they were working with the Jedi, or because we have the children from the Path of Deceit. It would have been much more interesting to reintroduce that into the more adult novels.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So I would have liked to see that a lot more. I mean, having the Force cult the brother of the ninth door was awesome, but Tilson Graff really didn't add anything to that. Even if it
Agreed.
was literally the brothers of the ninth door were like, oh well, they're the dark side, and it's like, oh, war is the only way that we get stronger, and like some dark side sentiment that would have been
Yeah,
infinitely
like
more
they feed off
interesting.
the chaos or something, like the
Right,
chaos
and
of
because
war.
actually it was really interesting. I actually really did like those characters because one of the things they said is like, "Hey, we're a peaceful cult, but like by following this, not only will we get paid a ton, following these orders, we'll get paid a ton, but we'll be able to step in and help people, and then they'll recognize us as
Yep.
legitimate." And it was interesting that they're like caught in between being like, well, yeah, we basically follow the dark side. We follow the
You can be
dark
good
side
for
of the
the wrong
force.
reasons,
Right.
sort of deal. Where it's like,
And you can be, and they would, in a way, they were almost bad for good reasons.
yeah,
Right. Where they're like, oh, we want to help people. And like, we're mostly a peaceful cult, but like, if it's going to be our means to an end, we'll have violence, but only when it's helpful towards peace,
yeah,
which was very interesting because in a lot of ways it is similar to the Jedi. In
right.
that, hey, violence should only be used as a necessary means, and that's basically what they're saying, except hey, you gotta assassinate a dude every now and then. You gotta assassinate a dude. It's right, it
Wow, that's
happens.
some CIA shit. Anyway,
Yeah, for real, it's the government.
which, well, that was side note. That's one of the things I want to talk about with the Graph character the most is that as much as like I think that character in a sense like actually just makes a lot of sense that they exist and that's their like motivation. I just don't think there was necessarily enough context surrounding him and what he has done in the past and has like how that person's really operated within the universe, if that makes sense. Like there
100%.
wasn't necessarily like a context to like really draw the parallels that definitely could have been drawn in like a post 9/11 sense of people profiting off of war in the military or militaries in that sense and developing technology. Like there could have been a lot more there that just kind of wasn't. And I feel
Right.
it feels a lot like the guy who was like the criminal they find in the Last Jedi, where he's like, "Oh, there's people making money on both sides." I'm like, it's a good point, but you really should have done more with it.
No, 100%, it's wasted. And I think it made me think about a lot of the plots that we get in the Clone Wars. You want to talk about a point like this where like people are trying to benefit off war and new
Banking
technology
clan,
and play
baby.
both sides. That's the Clone Wars. Like we're dealing with those politics, but that works out when you have a lot of context, and then we have the entire backdrop. It's really fully explained, and then you can drop that in there in its own little plot. It happens. It exists. This for 300 minutes. This was trying to do a lot at once with very little context. Um, I truthfully don't think you could read this. You could listen to this without reading the other books.
Agreed.
Because you would be
It's totally
so out of
supplemental
the.
reading. It
It's
is
totally is.
DLC.
Yeah, that's a great point. It is. It is basically DLC. For Star Wars High Republic. Um, my final thoughts. I'm not going to give a 60-second review to this because I just really don't know how. I think this was trying to do a lot well. I actually think it was. I don't know how much the author had in terms of like, hey, what they can do with the plot, but like, I will give George Mann credit. I actually thought the dialogue was pretty good. I
Yeah.
thought it was the delivery that really threw me off on some of this. I didn't think the voice acting was perfect for a lot of these characters, but I thought it was a well written dialogue and they did the best with the content that they had. Um, but at the end of the day, it was just it felt at times like a chore to watch this, to read this, listen to this. Jesus, I said three things wrong. It
To
felt like a
read, to
chore.
watch, to look at, to think about. It hurt. It was bad.
And I think like me reading the plot summary, like it's a really great setup. And it's so cool, but I think they kind of just let it get too far ahead of what it needed to be. I'm glad we got more to know context and what's going to happen in the next part of in Star Wars Cataclysm. It was really interesting to know more about the path of the open hand. I really like to get to see Jedha, but I would the things I liked I didn't get enough of.
Yeah, that's very
And
much how I feel.
I really only found myself getting connected to characters we already knew from other books, other than P3 and Keth, and Solandra Shell. So
Agreed.
basically, one plot line was the only thing I was attaching to, other than characters who were already in other books, aka Creighton's son and Ada Forte, who were Jedi's that appeared in Convergence.
Exactly. And I think you pretty much hit the nail on the head with that. The one with Kath, the show, and the droid. I feel like that dynamic was the best throughout. That's the thing I'll definitely remember.
That was the book, man.
Yeah,
That could
like
have been a book.
yeah, and what sucks is I really wanted them to go. Of course, they had to kill Kath, but it's a High
Right, because
Republic story.
essentially, like, Keth is just kind of like church boy,
I know.
helping out,
I
sweeping
want
the
greater
floors,
things
and
for
then
Kath, and then they
his whole thing was he wanted greater things for himself. He says that at the beginning. He's drinking at the bar, and he's like, "Oh man, I want a life of adventure and purpose,"
yeah, and he
and
does
it
something
shows up on
crazy
his
cool, and
doorstep.
that's just you hate to see someone only do a cool thing once, man.
Right, but it reminds me a lot of I think about Rogue One a lot, right? When you have that character who's and just in this one thing, and we're not talking about Andor, but I'm talking about the main character in Rogue One. Not talking. How do I want to word that? Not with Casey and Andor, like Cassie and Andor leading up to all that in Rogue One, yada yada. But what's the main character in Rogue One?
Jin
What's her
Erso,
name? Thank you. With Erso. Her death was satisfying because we knew the payoff,
exactly.
right? That was what led to the destruction of the Death Star. Keth dying or living would not change the plot at all.
Yep.
It changed the emotional stakes. It gave me something to go, oh man, and like actually feel bad about. But like, it didn't really change the book for him to die. And that's not a very effective death for a character. You know, Keth was a lot, actually, he was a lot of the plot. Like a lot of these circumstantial things that end up happening, Keth is
So
involved
much.
in. I would have rather just, other than just like circumstantial things happening because of him, I'd rather just have a book with him. Creighton's son and Ada Forte are investigating things in the background. Solandra Rowe is, learning about all these different cults and learning about Jedha through Keth. We get more intrigue with P3. I just would have loved more intrigue for a book where if you literally read the summary of it, it sounds like it's going to be an investigative terrorism plot. Half of it's just battle. And like,
Right.
oh, people are dead in the streets. Don't look at the bodies, children. Literally happens, that exact scene.
I
Let's
love
leave and get
that.
to our shuttle. It's like, oh my God.
No, I agree. Uh
But Charlie, I'll let you give your final thoughts. Then we're gonna end this on a happy note.
yeah. Overall, I don't think that this was any sort of magnum opus for Star Wars: The High Republic. However, I do think that this is just a neat little addition if you really want to go out of your way to get the context of what went down on Jeddah, because I have a feeling it will be more important as we go on. And I think it's an interesting context. There's a lot of comics and other things that cross over on this exact day of what's going on here, so that all provides this interesting context. Like, did you know Maz Kanata was there? She was there, but that's in a comic. But you know, overall, I think this is something where if you're like, man, I've been really racking up all these, Audible credits, and I'm caught up on my Star Wars books, go ahead and take a listen to this, but this will be far and away from the first thing that I recommend. And not because it's bad, it's just everything else is just so good.
Yeah, that's a great point. Um, there was one thing I actually coming out of this. I'm trying to look up the bartender's name. Do you remember his name? It was like
No.
Creighton or like um I
The,
really I really actually thought there was one scene at the end of this book, because between that plot line, that lovely plot line between with
oh, at the
Sho
end.
and Kat Sarapath, at the end, one of the promises she made to Kath when he died was, "I'll tell your story," essentially. And I had never realized how cool it would be to have a compilation of like what if style short stories of just like tales in a bar in the outer rim of people talking about stories that they'd heard of. And
Boy, do I have a book for you.
what okay?
The Legends
What do you okay?
books, uh, somewhat. They're all short stories. The Tales from Java's Palace books and the Tales of the Bounty Hunters ones. Those are all old legends. I have both of those. Shout out to Half
Wow,
Price
that was totally
Books.
unplanned.
But
Well, I'll
yeah,
have to read those, Charlie. That's super cool.
yeah. But I don't think I need to read them actually. I literally have them sitting over there. But
I mean,
yeah,
those books are literally older than us.
yeah, much older. Well,
Yeah, I
relatively.
think one of them's from '96.
Yeah. Oh boy, 2 years.
Oh man. Well, I mean, at the end of the day, I mean, I didn't have a ton of positive things to say, but I really do like that Star Wars is pushing the envelope,
Yeah,
trying new things. I really liked Tempest Runner. I think I just wasn't as in love with the plot with this, and I think Tempest Runner was focused on one character, so it was a
agreed. And
little
I think
easier to
that
keep
lends
track of.
itself so much better because uh, she seemed a lot more like active into what was occurring around her, if that makes sense.
Right, rather than
Versus what we
reactive.
have here is we have things happening to our set of characters versus them making things happen.
100%. 100%. But you know what? At the end of the day, Charlie, I'm looking forward to 2024. I'm gonna be a fucking scoundrel in space.
Yeah,
That's
baby.
what the episode is really about, Charlie. I'm excited for that, Uh but
I'm
I
just
don't
gonna
have
kill
anything
all the
else,
pikes,
Charlie.
baby. You saw what they did to Tatooine. They
Oh
killed.
good.
They
True.
killed. They killed that. They killed his tribe.
Genocide. Pike
Yeah.
genocide.
Yeah.
I'm ready for it.
Anywho.
Not me ending the end of our podcast by talking about genocide that I'm gonna commit and do. That didn't put me on a list. Oh man. Well,
Uh,
Charlie, that's it for me. You got anything else, buddy?
I think that'll do it. Honestly, the only thing that I kind of wish, and that's just because I'm this kind of person. Have you've seen like how they do like the character trailers for the High Republic on YouTube, which they've kind of
Yeah.
stopped doing, which is a little unfortunate because I really enjoy those. I would love if like any of the audio novels just kind of came with that in that animation style, to where it's just kind of
Yeah, it
like
would be very
cutouts and
helpful.
stuff. Like I would just love that if it even if it's just stills. Like I love the heck out of like comic book videos where they just do like their actual shots of like the scans very well. Where they're like, "This is what
Yeah.
happened," and it just kind of pans across the screen. I was like, those are always like the best. So I'd love to see something like that going forward for like these audio dramas, even if it is just like something small. And I get that's a lot to do, but that would be something neat.
Yeah, great point, Charlie. I think that's a great point, and I think it'd make it more attractive for readers. I think the more they can make this multimedia, pull people in, give them different experiences, the more
Yeah,
enjoyable this will be. Especially because we're not going to have movies for a while.
yeah. Like
Um,
imagine just like they put out like samples of audiobooks all the time. Like if that was just an animated YouTube video, and you're like, if you want more, here's the whole thing that you can just buy for
yeah, and
like
that
a
was
few
that
dollars.
that way for Path of Deceit. It was really great. It was really
Yeah,
useful, really good to get into the book. So, we'll see what they do in the future here. I'm really excited for Convergence. It's going to be a fun episode. So,
you
I'm
mean
ready to keep
Cataclysm?
going. Yeah, that too. I really liked Convergence. It was a good
Yeah.
book. No, I'm really
We're gonna
excited for
keep doing
Cataclysm
Convergence episodes only on.
only. But I'm really excited for Cataclysm.
Yeah,
So,
and we got
I'm really
Andor
enjoying
coming
High
up.
Republic. Yeah, and we're doing Andor. We got some fun episodes coming up. So, I really think that's it for us, folks. So, thanks for tuning in from all across the galaxy, as we always say here. So, if you like the episode, please consider subscribing to our podcast, sharing our podcast with a friend or a family member who might enjoy it. If you do want to interact with us, feel free to do so. and help us make the show better by interacting with us on Discord or Twitter using the link in the show notes. Once again, thanks for tuning in. Goodbye, and may the force be with you.
May the force be with you.